Welcome everyone to Mailed Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Twilight Zone Season 5 Episode 16. It's called The Self-Improvement of Salvadore Ross. So spoilers for the episode as always. This one is about a guy. I misread this last time. At the end of the show last time, I interpreted the description and what Rod Serling said as this guy's swapping faces and compared it to an early episode where that was already kind of done. It was actually a little bit different than that. It's this character, Salvadore Ross, can swap like any physical quality or any, including like sickness. In fact, that's how it's introduced, is that he has a broken hand and he swaps it with another patient in the hospital who's got a cough. And now he has the cough and this other guy's got the sore hand. So I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is a different thing. And I think my feelings of the episode as a whole boil down to kind of appreciating what it's trying to say and what it's doing with that premise in terms of how he treats other people, how he treats himself, how he values life and things like that. But maybe feeling a little bit murkier as a sort of straight episode in the sense that the rules for this power, this ability, seem very ill-defined to me. You know, it introduces it quite well, and it's like, hey, he's swapped this one physical quality, this illness, or this injury, for someone else's illness. But immediately, it jumps to something else. It jumps to him swapping time of life with someone else, where he effectively gives an old man his youth, and now he's as old as the 72-year-old man, and he sells like his remaining years for that. And then throughout the episode, he keeps buying years or sometimes more off of other young people so he can be young again. And it raised a lot of questions for me is for the logistics of this, because it kind of, the implication at one point when he's talking to like a young sort of bellhop style character, and he offers him $1,000 for a year of his life. He says, tomorrow you'll wake up 20 instead of 19. That's not that big a deal, right? And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that this works, at least with the age thing, which feels different from the... It feels different from swapping the illnesses and injuries to me a little bit, but okay, we're going to include that. Fair enough. But the rules that you're establishing here is that he's effectively bought a year from this guy. And to me, then, I would assume that he then spends a year being 19, because that's what this guy was, and then he'll go back to being 72. It feels like he's buying more younger years off of people more quickly than that. Also, I don't know if he just bought a lot of years off of one guy in the elevator, or if it worked differently with this guy, but by the time the elevator doors opened, this other guy looked really old, and Salvadore was looking young again. So I felt like it wasn't entirely clear how this age purchasing or swapping was working. Because my initial thought when he was offering to swap ages with the guy, I mean, that's what the word I used there was swap, because that's how they introduced this power. He swaps with the other person. So I thought when he offered the bellboy some money to just take a year and said, you'll wake up being 20 tomorrow instead of 19, I already thought that was conflicting with the rules that it had told me. I thought the whole point was he would swap for a year, because that's what happened before. I mean, not a year specifically, but he swapped with the old man. He became 72 and the other guy became whatever. Maybe you could argue because he's only taken a year, it's just not that noticeable. But it's not like, yeah, it's not like he can give it back though, which is the... That was weird. Like trying to wrap my head around the specific rules of this power was a little difficult. The episode felt a little inconsistent with it to me, or at least didn't explain it enough that I was feeling inconsistencies. Maybe it actually all made sense to the writers, I don't know. But trying to get my head around it was getting in the way a little bit of just enjoying what was going on in the story. So that would be my main critique. The story of the episode is about this very unlikable guy. Salvadore Ross is not a kind person. He's an asshole. He is introduced at the start by driving up to his love interest, and I mean that more directly than I normally do. Like, I'm not just describing the female character in the story as the love interest for the other character. He is fixated on this woman who has decided she doesn't really want anything to do with him, and he thinks that because he's driving a nice car now, she'll, you know, be into him, she'll be impressed, she'll want to date him again. It turns out it's not even his car. He's basically just borrowed it from someone who's rich because he's taken a job cleaning cars. And it very much sets up the themes in this first sequence of him looking at the world purely through the lens of money, of financial success, and he feels inadequate, he feels emasculated because he's a poor man, and because he thinks he's being rejected by this woman because he doesn't have a better standard of life to offer her, and that's how he's looking at it. And she keeps saying that it's not that. She keeps specifically saying it's just him. She's just, you know, like, they're not right for each other. And repeatedly through this scene, he grabs her arm in a very kind of aggressive way that felt, you know, very stern for its time. And it really builds this picture of a character who's materialistic, who clearly is fixed, you know, infatuated with this woman, but not in a way where it feels like a genuine romantic thing. It kind of spells it out by the end of the episode, but even from this very first scene, it's clear that even her, he's looking at as a possession, as a prize, as something to be gained, and that he's mad that he has been denied. And that kind of tracks throughout the whole episode, because as soon as he realizes he has this power in the hospital, he just immediately starts trying to commercialize it. That's immediately what he wants to do. I was actually wanting to compliment, because after the initial swap in the hospital, he goes to see this old rich guy that he knows probably through his work. And when he gets out the elevator, you can hear the guy in the elevator starting to cough. And the implication, I thought, was really, it was a really economical, quick way of saying he's already swapped his cough with this guy in the elevator. So now he's presumably as healthy as that guy was. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting mechanic. And I think that's partly why the rules of this power and the fact that it just turns into swapping ages as opposed to what it initially set up felt a little disappointing, because it felt like an interesting mechanic to play with. And this idea that he might at some point swap the wrong person. He might think someone's healthy and be, oh no, I've now got this thing that's a problem. Like, okay, it's one thing, he can just swap away from another physical thing if he realizes, oh crap, this person had something wrong with them, I'm just going to jump to someone else. But what if he jumped to someone he didn't realize had a mental illness? Like, would he even be able to have the whereabouts to do it? Like, there's a lot of interesting questions that came up from this first setup of the powers. So it was almost surprising when the age swap itself even worked, because I was assuming he was just like jumping to conclusions here, and he thought he could sell this and get this rich guy's money because he wants money. That's what he set up in the opening of the episode. He wants to be rich, he wants to be successful, and this is him seeing a way to get to that. And of course it plays into the themes quite well, and I appreciate this part, which is that he doesn't value his life, he doesn't value everyone else's life. He is just obsessed with material again, and hence the commercialization of this power as soon as he has it. But when he was trying to convince the old man, and the old man's like, ah, you're crazy, this isn't going to work. The two things that stuck out to me here is, one, is I thought he was going to be wrong. I didn't think he could just swap ages. I was surprised when it worked. But even more so, the other thing that I've got a problem with this part of the episode and how it plays out, is that we never actually get to see the reaction of the old man when he becomes young again. They just kind of skip over it. It just cuts to a later time where Salvadore is already an old man. He's already swapped ages with him, and this is the scene with the sort of the bellboy character that comes in and talks to him. And all I could think was, well, why did we gloss over that? Like, especially since that scene with the old man went out of its way. He was constantly saying to him, I don't believe you. He laughs at him. He's so, and rightfully so, like, I get why he's skeptical. I'm not saying he's being mean here, but he laughs in his face and just sort of agrees to it, thinking it's a joke and it'll never happen. It feels so strange to me to not get like a young actor to do the reaction of, hey, I'm young now. That feels really weird. I felt robbed of like a pivotal part of the story confirming that this even worked, because I didn't think it would work because I didn't think it fit into the powers. And then that's all he does for the rest of the episode, is take time from people, take their ages away. I guess, yeah, the argument is that age is a physical thing. But again, it goes back to the idea that he was just straight up swapping before. So how is he taking just 1 year from someone? Exactly. I don't know, like, that really bogged me down as we were going. But like I say, the character work is pretty strong. He sees all of this as something that he can just gain. It's all financial. It's all, or even financial. Like, financial is just the means to the end. It's all about possession. And he's very possessive. And when we come back after the ad break, he immediately starts pursuing Leah, the love interest, again, and tries to say, hey, I'm better now. I'm this, I'm that. And she's like, well, that's great, but, like, no, I'm like, you know, I don't know. But he sort of convinces her to go to dinner. Her father's like a sort of recurring character in this story as well, and he's this kind old man who never enforces anything on her, but makes it clear that he doesn't approve of this asshole. And honestly, the audience is kind of on his side, because Salvadore is an asshole. And it cuts to them at his, like, new rich apartment that he got from the old guy, and they're kissing, but she kind of pulls away, and he gets really angry and grabby again. He's grabbing her arms. And she's trying to explain to him that, like, the reason why she's not into him, like, yeah, the physical passion was kind of there. That's why there was even, like, a romance of any sorts in the first place. But he's just not right for her. He's just not the kind of man she wants to be with. He's not compassionate. He's not empathetic. He's just not, you know, it's not something you can buy. That's the phrase she uses over and over again, is this is not something you can change and develop, right? You can say you've made yourself better, you can do all these things, but this is just who you are, and no amount of, you know, she doesn't say this part because she doesn't know what he's been doing, but no amount of swapping with anyone else is going to just shortcut you to being right for someone, or being right for anything, really. You have to put in the work. So I think that's a big part of the story, and he gets very frustrated, but of course he doesn't take this gently. He instead takes her home and tries to make a deal with her father, because she, you know, because they talk about how her father is got all these qualities that she wants in a husband. And he makes a deal with the father to take his compassion. That's what he asks for. He asks for part of his personality, which again feels like we're again stretching what this power can do necessarily, but fine, we'll go with it. So the end of the episode, seemingly the old man is agreed to this. Again, probably not realizing that it was real. Like, I think that's the big thing here, is that almost everyone he makes a deal with clearly just sort of says, yeah, sure, I'll agree to it. But they only do that because they don't actually think it's going to work, or anything's going to happen. They think this guy is just really stupid with money, and he's just handing them money for things. I presume the dad was kind of the same way, and he shows up at the end with Leah, but now they're kissing and they seem like they're really into each other. And obviously I'm like, okay, we're going to get to the end here, and it's going to be that he is now compassionate and nice, but the dad's an asshole. And that's where we're going to leave off. And I thought that the daughter was going to notice that. I thought the daughter was going, the end of the episode was going to be the daughter realizes that her dad's become this bad person. And I don't know what they were going to do with that necessarily. I didn't really know what the final sort of beat would be, but I thought that was a big part of it. The daughter never even notices. The daughter goes off somewhere else and doesn't even mention anything. And I was also shocked to find out that this was the very next day, and she's already kissing him. The night before, the very night before, he was grabbing her arm. She was telling him that he was totally wrong for him because he doesn't have all these qualities. And somehow by lunchtime the next day, after making this deal to get the compassion from the old man, he has wooed her completely, and she's madly in love. She says she loves him during the scene. So that felt like a bit of a leap to me as well. And it's not even like I'm saying I want to see much of a progression there. I get that that would be the ultimate effect. I just think more of a time change would have benefited. It was really hard to swallow this was the very next day, given how much she seemed so sure about how she felt and about what her opinion was of Salvadore. But the ending actually goes for a different tactic, so I felt disappointed we didn't get to see her kind of noticing that her dad had changed. That felt like a missed opportunity as well. because we've established these two characters and they're sort of like kind of nice father-daughter loving relationship. So I think it would maybe add to the character of Salvadore that he had ruined that. Like, maybe now that he feels compassion, he would feel bad that he's done this. And I guess in a way he kind of does, because like he tries to apologize to the father. He says that now he feels compassion. He realizes how much of a dick he's been, and he wants to ask for forgiveness from the old man. That's where he goes. So I guess part of that is kind of there. But I guess maybe what would have been more interesting to me would be perhaps, you know, maybe he feels guilty that he's ruined this father-daughter relationship, and he chooses to give it back. He chooses to give the compassion back, and maybe that's how he grows as a character, is he finally learns a lesson by the end and does something selfless for a change. Like, I'm not saying I needed that to like the ending. I'm not even saying I dislike the ending. The ending is just more of a shock value thing, though, because the ending is that when he tries to ask for forgiveness from the father's like, I gave you my compassion yesterday, and pulls out a gun from under his blanket and shoots him. The end of the episode is Salvadore lying there dead because, well, he worked himself into a shoot, to use a wrestling term. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a comeuppance episode. He's a horrible person. He treats everyone like they're an object. They're just something to be traded with and to be bargained with, and doesn't understand things like compassion and empathy and all that stuff. And his ironic ending is that by taking this kind father figure's personality away from him, or his compassion, as I said, that's the word. I don't know why I keep using the same word, but that's literally what they call it in the episode. He's met his own demise. This father clearly didn't want them to be together ever, but he was kind, and he was understanding that it was his daughter's choice, and he would give his advice, but he ultimately knew that it wasn't for him to get in the way. If that's what she really wants, he would let her make that mistake, effectively. But now that his compassion's gone, he is willing to take matters into his own hands. So, you know, I think ultimately the idea of if you treat life like it is nothing but a commodity, if it is nothing but you know, you don't value human life, then the irony being is that you've already kind of lost it, and then he literally loses it at the end of the episode. So yeah, this is a frustrating one for me, because I kind of really respect what it's doing with its themes and its character work, and about this guy thinking he solved the problem of why the woman doesn't like him, but he's completely missing the point. He's trying to take these shortcuts. He thinks he can just change a few details and she'll fall in love with him, but it was never going to happen, and he's not learning that lesson, and then ultimately meets this comeuppance because he keeps going further and further with it. Like, I like that side of the episode. The actual practical in-universe, like how the power works and how that progresses throughout the episode, and how it kind of glosses over a couple of moments that I think it felt like they set up and then just didn't deliver. Like the old man, at the moment, like he's convinced, or the moment that the swap happens, that would get his reaction, and like his reaction to being a young man, that would be kind of interesting. His reaction that Salvadore was correct and that he was making a genuine offer. And then likewise, the daughter maybe noticing that her father had changed and had become more of an abrasive, curmudgeon kind of old man. I don't know. Like, these are moments that it felt like it was setting up in the prior scenes and then just kind of whiffed on. So yeah, I think it's funny because I noticed the episode rating of this one going into it, that it was actually very similar to the previous few episodes. So I was kind of hoping my streak of not perfect but pretty good and interesting ideas for the stories was going to continue. This has part of it. It does have the interesting idea, and it does have some good character work. Don Siegel, who's a very well-known director from this era, he did the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like, the direction's solid in how it handles the moments themselves. I just think the script is missing a couple of key scenes for me. Like, I can see why it's maybe held in similar regard to the previous few episodes, but there was just a few other little problems that maybe dragged it down a bit for me compared to those. Still not a terrible episode by any stretch though, and certainly there's stuff here. There's meat to chew on. There's stuff to talk about, but ultimately it left me a little colder than the last 3 episodes did. Although it definitely still feels like it's continuing the trend of having better concepts, you know, rather than there was maybe a batch earlier in the season where it felt like we were doing kind of just old ideas again. I feel like these last few have all offered something a little different and brought something to the table. So yeah, that's the self-improvement of Salvadore Ross. Let's take a look and see what's coming next time. Rod did show up. He was very excited about the cast. He listed like 3 or 4 cast members, which is more than usual. But he described a society, a futuristic society where everyone's the same, I think, was the gist of what he was saying. But let's see what IMDb says, because I might have misheard part of that. It's called Number 12 Looks Just Like You. In a future society, everyone must undergo an operation at age 19 to become beautiful and conform to society. One young woman desperately wants to hold on to her own identity. Okay. That actually sounds very good. As a science fiction fan, I'm immediately seeing the commentary that can come from this, and the idea of just in the real world conforming to traditional beauty standards, and this idea that you have to have hair a certain way, you have to be X tall, you have to, you know, get plastic surgery, have this particular face type or this particular body type, or so on and so on. It's already screaming all these ideas at me, even just from that. So very cool. And we'll see how that works out next time. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.